Today we are going to talk about the variety of living organisms. But first I would like to request you to ignore this message. It's just that I'm too lazy to update my computer. Our planet is filled with millions of different types of organisms. Not all of them are giant organisms like a blue whale. Some of them can be very small and even invisible to our naked eyes. From the majestic Bengal tiger to this frail lizard to the magical flying fish to the peacock, the Venus flytrap, and this little thing which is probably now crawling on your skin as you are watching this video. Even this glass of water, which apparently looks lifeless, is actually filled with life. If we dive into the microscopic world, we will see that life is everywhere. Now, all these millions of organisms that we see around us can be classified in simple groups. Now, actually, this grouping or this classification system is a different topic and encompasses a vast syllabus. But since you are in O levels, and especially for students in Edexcel, all you need to know is that all the living organisms that we see around us can be classified into 5 major groups. These groups are known as the kingdoms, and then there are 5 kingdoms. Now, these kingdoms include the plants, the animals, fungus, and the protists, and there is also the bacteria. So 5 kingdoms. Now, all these kingdoms, organisms of these kingdoms, have some features in common. For example, all the organism that falls in the kingdom plant must satisfy the following condition. So plants are organisms which are multicellular. That means all plants are multicellular organisms. Their cells contain chloroplast. So if you see an organism containing chloroplast, then you'll have to understand that this organism is actually a plant. Now, don't confuse between chloroplast and chlorophyll. Chloroplast is a large structure which is present in the cell, and chlorophyll is a chemical. So for an organism to become a plant, it must have chloroplast. Many organisms might have chlorophyll, but having chlorophyll doesn't mean that it is a plant. For example, there are many bacteria that contains chlorophyll, but we are not going to classify them as plant, because although they have chlorophyll, the bacteria do not have chloroplast. So the plant must have chloroplast. Since they have chloroplast, plants are also able to carry out photosynthesis. Their cells have cell wall, and these cell wall are made of cellulose, and then they store carbohydrate as starch. Examples of plants include some flowering plant, for example cereals like maize, and also herbaceous legumes, for example peas and beans. You should remember some name of the plant as they come in MCQs, also in fill in the blanks. So you must remember some examples from each of these kingdoms. Here are some examples of exotic plants. The diversity, you can see the diversity of plants which are found in these planets. This is a giant flower, and this is, I have forgotten the name, but this is the species that produces the largest flower on this planet. This is a sundew plant, and this is a carnivorous plant. It can trap organism. This is a plant, I think it's found in Madagascar, and it holds a lot of water inside its trunk. And this is the legendary Venus flytrap, which is famous for eating small insects and even small animals. In this case, it is feeding on a frog. So all of these organisms satisfies some common features. As you can see, all of them are multicellular organism. They have the chloroplast, and then their cell contains cell wall made of cellulose. Our next kingdom is the animal. Animals are multicellular organisms. Animals are multicellular organisms. Their cells do not have chloroplasts, and they are not able to carry out photosynthesis. Also, they do not have any cell wall. They usually have nervous coordination and are usually able to move from one place to another. They often store carbohydrate in the form of glycogen. Now, animals can again be subdivided into a number of groups. Now, for O level, especially for Edexcel group, you don't need to learn these different variations. Just for you should know a bit about them because of general knowledge. So animals can be further divided into vertebrates, that is animals with backbones, and invertebrate, that is animals without backbone. These are the animals that you commonly see around you. There are the mammals, for example us, we are the mammals. There are the birds, there are the amphibians, for example the frogs. The reptiles like lizards and snakes, and the fish. So these are all the vertebrates. And then there are the invertebrates, for example the snails, the worms, the insects. The coral that you see in the sea are also invertebrates. Remember SpongeBob from the cartoon? SpongeBob is a sponge, and this sponge is actually an animal which is found in the sea. Of course, the real sponges cannot walk about or talk, and especially they do not have a friend. The next group of organisms are the fungi. These are organisms that are not able to carry out photosynthesis. So the first differentiating point between fungi and the plant is that plants can carry out photosynthesis, whereas fungi cannot carry out photosynthesis. There is a misconception. A lot of people think that fungus are probably plants, but no, they are entirely two different kingdoms. So fungus cannot carry out photosynthesis. Their body is usually organized into mycelium made from thread-like structure called hyphy. Now we know that organisms, especially animals and plants, they are made of units called cell. Fungus are also made of cells. However, when it comes to fungal cell, we don't call them cell, rather we say hyphy. So a fungus is made of many hyphy joined together. Many hyphy fuses together to form a thread-like structure which is called mycelium. So individual units are the hyphy, and a number of hyphy joins together to form a mycelium. Now a hyphy contains many nuclei. Some examples are single-celled. Their cells have walls made of chitin. So fungus also have a cell wall. However, their cell wall is made of something called chitin. Remember, plants have cell wall. However, their cell walls were made of cellulose. And in case of fungi, the cell wall is made of chitin. Chitin is also a type of polysaccharide. However, it is a nitrogenous polysaccharide, which means chitin contains nitrogen. The feed by extracellular secretion of digestive enzyme onto the food material and absorption of organic product. I will explain this point later in the video. But what we need to know is that this type of nutrition is called saprotrophic, also sometimes called saprophytic nutrition. So plants carries out photosynthesis, animals feeds on other organisms, fungi, it undergoes a type of nutrition called the saprotrophic nutrition. They also store carbohydrate, but they store carbohydrate in the form of glycogen and oil droplets. Example of fungi includes mucor and yeast. Mucor is a multicellular fungus, whereas yeast is a single-celled fungus. This means fungus can be divided into two groups. One is the unicellular group, the other one is a multicellular group. Unicellular fungus have only one cell, for example the yeast. Multicellular fungus are made of multiple cells, for example the mole fungus. Now the mole fungus has another group, or mole fungus can also be referred to as mucors. Now of course there are many varieties of mole fungus. Mucor is one of them. So basically mucor is a type of mole fungus. So mucor is a type of multicellular fungus. In contrast, yeast is a unicellular fungus. Here you can see some yeast cells. Remember, we said that yeasts are unicellular fungus. Here you can see them in the picture. See, these are separate cells. Here is a yeast, here is another yeast, here is another yeast. Here are many yeast joined together, but they can survive independently. Now, yeast can be dried and used as powder form. Yeast has a number of commercial uses. We will see the use of yeast in our future videos. These are multicellular fungus, or the moles or the mucors. You can clearly see that the mole fungus, they are thread-like. Here you can see the threads. If you want to see them in real life, what you can do is that you can take a piece of bread and keep it somewhere open. Within a few days you will see that the food will be covered with some fine hair-like structures. These are the mycelium. You can also find fungus on your walls. Here's a picture of mole fungus under microscope, and here you can see the individual threads zoomed in, and if you notice closely you will see that these threads are made of units like this one. So the thread of the fungus is known as a mycelium, and individual myceliums are made of smaller units called the hyphy. As we have already told that hyphy are actually the unit of fungus. So if I take a single hyphy and observe it under microscope, then we will see that the hyphy is tubular in shape. It has a cell wall, and this cell wall, as we have already seen, is made of a nitrogenous polysaccharide called the chitin. Inside the fungus there is cytoplasm. In the center there is a very large permanent vacuole, and here you can see many nucleuses. Now we don't call nucleuses, rather we say nuclei in plural. Normally we know that one cell has one nucleus, but hyphy or the fungus are exceptions. A single hyphy may have many nuclei. You will also find some food reserve which is stored in the form of oil droplets or glycogen. So to review, fungus are made of units called hyphy. In multicellular fungus, many hyphy joins together to form mycelium, which are the hair-like or thread-like structures. Unicellular fungus like yeast also have similar structure. Again, they have a chitin cell wall, then there is the cell membrane, then there is the cytoplasm, there is the nucleus, there is the central vacuole. Also there will be the food reserve, mitochondria and other structure. Earlier we said that fungus observe a different mode of nutrition, which is called saprophytic or saprotrophic nutrition. Now what does this mean? Saprophytic organisms are a group of organisms that gets their nutrition by breaking down dead or decaying organic materials. They are not going to hunt like a lion and feed on a complete organism. Rather, they are going to feed on dead materials. So how does it work? You see, in case of saprophytic nutrition, the fungus will release the enzyme outside its body. Normally we know that animals have their enzymes inside the body. The animal takes in the food through its mouth, it goes into their stomach, and in the stomach and intestine the enzyme breaks down the food. But saprotrophic organisms, for example the fungus, they follow a different approach. From the tip of their hyphae they release the enzyme out of their body. These enzymes lands on the food and digest it. Now since the enzyme is released out of the body, these type of enzymes are called extracellular enzyme, and here the digestion occurs outside the body. So the digested products are then reabsorbed by the hyphae, and then the nutrition enters into their system. So in animals we take in the food, digestion occurs inside our body, but in case of fungus they expel the enzyme carries out the digestion outside the body, and then they just takes in the digested products. Here in this picture you can see how a fungus is digesting a piece of bread. Initially the hyphae released some enzyme onto this portion of the bread. The enzymes digested the bread and formed soluble organic compounds, which were then sucked in by the hyphae of the mucus, just like the root of a plant absorbs water, and they entered into the system of the fungus. The fungus used this nutrition to grow further, and the fungus has penetrated deep into the food. Here you can see, this is a fast forward video, but this gives you some idea about how fungal digestion occurs. Initially some fungus lands on the food, and then they release the enzyme. It releases nutrition. The fungus utilizes the nutrition and it starts to grow by producing these hair-like structures. Eventually the food is exhausted, and once the food is used up, the fungus starts to die. Fungus can reproduce both sexually and asexually. Yeast undergoes sexual reproduction in a process known as budding. In budding, a single yeast without any partner can produce another yeast. So basically what happens is that the nucleus divides and it goes to a corner. It picks up some cytoplasm and forms a small yeast which is still attached to the mother yeast. This baby yeast is exactly identical to the mother yeast. Eventually, this yeast is going to get separated from the mother and will continue to grow an adult yeast. In some cases, the bud may decide to stick to the parent and produce more buds. All these smaller yeast actually came from this original parent yeast, and all of them are genetically identical. The advantage of this form of asexual reproduction is that the yeast can reproduce very fast without any partner. This picture shows some yeast undergoing budding. If you look at these two yeast, you can see they have buds attached to them. This yeast also had a bud, this one, but it has decided to separate away from the parent. These are newborn yeast. These new buds might stick to the parent, or they may also decide to leave the parent after they have grown to a certain size. When the fungus reproduce sexually, they produce some seed-like structure. Just like the plants produces seeds, the fungus produces spores. Here you can see the spores. The spores remains inside the fungus until they reach full maturity. Once they are matured and ready to be spread, the fungus bursts open and releases the spores. Now, these spores are very small. They are like dust particles, even smaller than dust. So they can get carried away by the wind and dispersed into the air. After the spores lands onto a surface, and if the condition is favorable, the spore germinates, produces hypha, the hypha produces more hypha, and then they form a complete mycelium. And from a single spore, a completely new fungus is formed. You have to understand that a single fungus can produce millions of spores. That is why the spores or the fungus can multiply very rapidly. If you leave a piece of bread exposed to the air, you will see that within a few days or few weeks, the entire bread will get covered with fungus. Here's a microscopic image of the fungus. Here you can see a mycelium, and here at the end of mycelium you can see a chamber, and this is filled with the spores. Once the spores get matured enough, this chamber bursts open, releasing the spores. Here, this has already been broken and the spores have come out. In this picture, you can see how a spore germinates. Here is a spore, and it is germinating by producing hypha. Eventually this hypha will produce more hypha and it will form an adult fungus. In this interesting picture, you can see that some dust is coming out from this weird looking structures. It's almost alien. However, these are all fungus. So these blobs, they are part of fungus and they are full of spores. And as you see that as soon as the rainwater hits the soil structure, they react by releasing this cloud of spore. Like I've already said, that spores are actually smaller than dust particle. this cloud or smoke contains millions and billions of spores. These fungal spores will be distributed in the air and they will land somewhere and a new fungus will be produced. So that's it for part 1. We will discuss part 2 shortly.